Casey gets 57 from the Rans D, and I've got Wade Isbell here.
Wade Isbell, happy Friday.
Thank you, sir. Same to you.
We lost the annual Duck Washington game yesterday, unfortunately. I don't know who's going to win that. It was probably going to be a close one, but I know that's always a fun one in your family. Your wife being the Duck fan she is.
Yeah, I'm kind of celebrating Pac-12 North champs in the COVID year.
Right. That's 3 and 5 years, baby.
Right. I saw someone make a post about how Jimmy Lake probably made that cancellation announcement with a Pac-12 North's champ hat on. So that we'll have to wait another year to see the next installment of the rivalry.
So before we jump into the matchups, I know we're going to look at the championship bracket as well as the toilet bowl bracket, because we're perennial toilet bowlers, unfortunately. Is there one person in the championship bracket that you're definitely rooting against? Like, I do not want this person to win the title.
The closest thing would be Casey, just because then we'll have to hear about it for the next, 9 months or so. But not really. I mean, I feel like, Ian has been just handed kind of a shit deck this year in terms of having those studs, but losing McCaffrey, looks like he's down Julio this week. So I have a hard time rooting against Ian. He's such a nice guy. Musa in the division, I kind of root for him also when playoffs roll around. It's kind of the sacrificial lamb that we in the Knox send into the playoffs each year. And then, Randy, he's been a kind of hard luck guy also. So I tend to root for him quite a bit when he ends up here, just because I feel like we're kindred spirits in terms of, well, that was a terrible decision to make in terms of trading this guy or drafting that guy. And then Jeff, he's been solid all year. So it'd be nice to see him kind of etch his name on the trophy, but there's no one other than Casey that I'd say I'm rooting against.
I would agree with you. I mean, I love the guy, but man, he's just, I don't know what we'd be doing in this pandemic without fantasy football. I mean, imagine that. I mean, the amount of time and effort he puts into finding innocuous stats. And anyway, well, yeah, we are rooting against Casey, which only probably builds his ego even more. But I am with you. I am rooting for my Pinella guys, my AJs, and Randy to get it done this year, just so we can shut those fucks up down in the Carl. But we'll see. I know Jeff. Everybody's in that playoff mix. I think has a legit shot. I think maybe except Ian, just because he's so banged up.
But he does still have the X factors of Mahomes and Lamar. So that's, I think, you look at his roster and it doesn't look good, but those guys at the top can do some crazy things. Yeah,
he's definitely never out of one with that guy. Well, let's take a look at some of the matchups, and we'll start with the toilet bowl. We'll start with yours first. We won't spend a lot of time on these because obviously this is not the main attraction, but we don't want to totally ignore them either, because the toilet bowl champ, that is a nice carrot that our league has set up to where if you win that, you can basically keep a fifth guy essentially, or decide where you want to pick. Unless you're Gist and you decide to pick fourth for some reason. But the first one, Wade, is your game against Los. Handicap that one for me.
So I think, not trying to do the reverse jinx thing, I just don't see how I win this one, with Woods scoring an 11, which that's a tough matchup, seeing Gilmore a little bit. But those receivers that Los has, Los has been the hard luck guy in the league in terms of, his all play record is like 80 and 63. He's lost games where he's scored, 227, 226, 242, 260. Just a kind of a like what can go wrong will go wrong kind of year for him. So I think, if nothing else, this toilet bowl will be an opportunity for him to maybe like salvage something. You look, Mike Davis just becomes a better and better pickup. Seems like every time McCaffrey's coming back, something happens and he's out. So, having the decent running back play there, Rodgers against Detroit should be a great spot. I just think this one to me looks like one of those, probably 230 to maybe 210 type of matchups where Los pulls this one out.
So you like Los, so you're right. I mean, you look at his receivers. I mean, that receiving core should not be in the toilet bowl. And you're right. I think he might be the hardest luck guy we've had in a few years. He with that all play and with those points. I mean, that's a 9-5 record. That's an 8-6 record. That's not a 4-10 record. So yeah, I think Los big time hard luck. And I had a little bit of hard luck, but nothing compared to what Los had to go through, because that is a damn tough 4-10 team.
When you think about Los, it hasn't been injuries that have derailed them. It's just been, some matchups that other guys, they put up that kind of point total and they're coming out on top. And for him, it's just who he's played and the timing of those matchups. It hasn't really worked out for him.
Yeah, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that he had those receivers and that CMC was going to miss half the season, so he's got Carolina starting running back, and Kareem Hunt would take over the job for 4 or 5 weeks, and he would still be 4-10. I've been, what the hell are you talking about? Was he only play one quarterback every weekend? But that's just the way it's gone for him. But yeah, I think you're right. I think probably Los is probably the bet here if I was throwing money on it. The other toilet bowl matchup, which is truly a toilet bowl matchup, is the dark side against Yusuf. Sorry, fellas, but Yusuf basically threw in the towel early, and that's kind of where he's at. He does have some decent matchups though this week, and then Kinney. How he got to 5 wins, I'll never know, but there he is at 5-9, and I don't know what the hell is going to happen here. This is actually the first time I've looked at it, but just off first glance, I kind of like Yusuf's matchups there. Tannehill against the Jags, Trubisky against Houston, that's in his favor, and then on down the line, there's a lot of good ones for him.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, this one to me probably boils down to if Derrick Henry has a monster game, that could spell disaster for Yusuf. Also, what happens with Zeke? If Zeke, he's been kind of limited this week with a calf. If he can go and not be limited, that's a really good matchup against the Bengals. So he could put up a big kind of, shake off some of the bad games he's had recently, put up a nice number there. So I think that play kind of determines maybe who wins this one. You look at even Yusuf's bench. I mean, he's got Curtis Samuel, who's off COVID now, but other than that, if he had to pivot to someone, not a lot of good options there. And so I agree with you. I think it's probably Yusuf, but if either Zeke sits or is, significantly limited, or if Henry has one of those monster December games against Jacksonville that he's had in the past, that could kind of swing it the other way towards Kinney.
Yeah, for sure. I'm probably going to lean Yusuf on this one. But again, Kinney's been a lot better. I mean, the Cole Beasley pickup, I just pulled up his numbers there. This freaking guy, look at this. You see this? I mean, this guy's been unbelievable. He's like turning into Doug Baldwin over there.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh, they're, for as good as they are defensively, they have been, victimized a little bit by the slot receiver. I think I had Boyd one week where he got him pretty good. And so, what projects as a potential shootout, just because the Bills can score on just about anybody, you'd think Beasley's a real good play this week, and then the shootout obviously helps Kinney as well with Roethlisberger. So I think Kinney has a couple of paths to victory, but I do lean Yusuf, just kind of looking at the matchups he has.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so let's take a look at the main events. First off, IAC against New World Order. Man, nice start for Casey last night. We all heard about it. Got the big pick six, the whammy from the defense. Aside from that, though, he's got some tough matchups. So I don't know what thread it was on we were talking about, but Kyler against the Giants, who Kyler's looked like shit for 5 weeks, and then Baker against Baltimore. Now I know Baltimore's not Baltimore anymore, but it still is Baltimore technically. And it seems like Baltimore always has kind of Cleveland's number. Not a lot of firepower there. Although Aaron Jones against Detroit, he killed them about 10 weeks ago. So before this started, I was probably leaning Musa a little bit, but I think IAC's got the advantage.
I think so too. It's hard to overcome, nearly a 60 on the defense. I think that's going to be just too much for Musa. Musa, if he were playing me this week, I would think I like his chances to go up to 300, since he essentially did that to me twice, both the weeks I played him. But I think he's been more in like the 220 range the other weeks where he's played the other owners. And, even with some decent matchups and, receivers that like Crowder against Seattle, that could be a big game. The Minnesota defense isn't any good, but is Mike Evans, too banged up? So there's some plays there that like big play options that have, for some of his big weeks, propelled Musa to solid numbers, but I really don't see him getting up above, 260 this week. And with a 60 from your defense, Casey, Aaron Jones probably goes for 40 at least. The receivers could dud out a little bit. That's the one area where I feel like, if Casey just gets very little out of those receivers, they're all kind of injury prone guys. So you could see one of those guys, first target of the game pulls up with a hamstring or something like that, and you get a 0. So if something like that happens, I think it opens the door. But, other than something kind of, injury fluky like that, I think this is probably Casey setting up a showdown with AJ. And I think the league would really enjoy the back and forth there if we could see something like that. And that's the way I think I see this one going. Probably like a 270, 280 for Casey, and maybe like a 260 for Musa.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of looking at this really hard now. I've looked at it a few times. That Minnesota Tampa Bay game, a lot's going to happen in that game. If that's a shootout, then I think Musa has a really good chance. If that game ends up being 24-19 or something like that, more of a ground game, then I think Casey definitely has the advantage, though. Although, man, Casey's really rolling at tight end. He's kind of playing tight end roulette against Waller. That could be a big advantage for Musa. But Casey's still got those running backs. It'll be interesting. I'm curious to see kind of how it starts out. Casey's got a lot of guys late, but he's got a few guys early. If those guys hit, if Kiki hits, if Devontae hits, if Cole, if they're all getting 15 to 20, then he's probably rolling.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. The other one, kind of an interesting matchup too. And the last one we'll talk about, and we'll move on to some other stuff, is Randy's team. Everybody hurts sometimes. We'll just call it Cappers against RDR. As we mentioned, RDR is banged up. He's starting ex-Cal receiver Chad Hansen. He's got TJ Hawkins, who's actually been doing pretty good. It's just not a lineup that scares you. Whereas he's starting Hurts, which he probably won't put up a very big number, but man, he's got a lot of firepower in that receiving course.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that you do fall back on with Hurts is he's probably good for 50 rushing yards. And so you can be a pretty terrible passing quarterback and still put up like a 30, 35. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. I mean, we see it with Lamar. I've seen it with Taysom Hill the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, he threw a couple touchdowns, but before that, he didn't really do much in the passing game, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns and went up over 50 yards. So it was, he's in the 30s with performances like that. I think for me, you see Ian with Mahomes in a pretty good matchup. Lamar did well against Cleveland earlier in the year. Allen Robinson's in a good spot now that Roby is on his PED suspension. Deontay Johnson's in a decent matchup. Chad Hansen was good last week, and if Cooks and QT are banged up a little bit, I think Deshaun Watson's one of those guys that could throw to just about anybody. Coming in on street clothes and entering the lineup, he's just kind of one of those next level guys. So I wouldn't be surprised if, Hansen can do like a 5 for 80 or something like that, which, it's not what you would have gotten ideally with like a Julio type of performance, but I think, it's something you could live with if you can get a big game out of Robinson. And so I think Ian, though, it's just, Zeke can't go. Maybe Pollard becomes a pretty good play against the Bengals and he can slide him in there. But Randy's one of those teams with his receivers as well. I think it's like kind of Los on steroids there, especially with Fuller out.
Mm-hmm.
AJ Brown, great matchup. Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill. DK's got the Jets. Tight ends a little bit of a question mark, but Kamara looked better last week. He'd struggled with Hill under center, and it didn't look like, for whatever reason, the offense was running in a pro Kamara kind of way, but looked a little bit better. So, you would think against the Eagles and their rush defense isn't very good, that could be a good spot. McKissick without Gibson's in a pretty good spot. And so for me, I think, on paper, this looks like a Randy, maybe 265, Ian 235 kind of matchup with, maybe an ability if Zeke doesn't go for Pollard to get things a little bit closer for Ian, but it just feels like, too much bad luck and not enough depth for him to be able to overcome this. Whereas, Randy, like looking at his bench, he's got Robbie Anderson on the bench. Like I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better player on someone's bench in the first round of the playoffs than that guy. So I think for me, I'm leaning Randy pretty heavily on this one.
Yeah, I like Randy too. Right now they're both raw dogging each other. No kicker started, so we'll see if they decide to continue that way or throw some kickers in there. I guess total points doesn't matter in the playoffs in terms of your total scope of things, but it could be the difference in a game for sure. All right, well, that's what we think. Who's your favorite to win it all?
I think for me, I haven't looked ahead at the Week 16 matchups, and that so it's hard to say for sure, but I like Randy in this matchup. And then I do like Casey in the other, but just looking at Casey's skill players outside of Aaron Jones, to me, I have a hard time saying that he's going to make it further than, this one win in the playoffs. And so I'd probably roll with AJ making it to the finals out of that 2-3-6 game next week. And then I do like Jeff. So I think it's Jeff, it's AJ. And I would probably go ahead and give the nod to the guy who's been the best team all year, and that's Jeff.
You did point something out to me, and I occasionally will go onto this page and adjust, my coach comments, and I saw you did there, dead man walking, pretty funny. But Randy, whoa, lights out. Randy had a pretty funny one. He pointed this out to me. We're only talking about RDR because some Taysom Hill fluke stat correction BS. Now, I believe if that hadn't happened, he's still in and you're still out, correct?
I believe so. I think I would have needed that, and I would have needed to beat Kinney, who I think he beat me by 4 or 5, and he had that huge game from Cole Beasley. I think Logan Thomas had a big game also. So I would have needed one of those guys to just chill a little bit in my matchup with Kinney. And, I might have been able to sneak in with a couple extra wins in the point differential. But I think I'm pretty sure Ian's in either way. It's just would have been, could I have snuck in instead of Casey?
Yeah. So let's put some polls up. Your favorite network theme song, do you have one?
So I'm assuming that ESPN is the Monday Night Football theme and not some, whatever Sunday night primetime thing it was before, although that was an underrated theme song also. But I went with Monday Night Football in that one. To me, that's just the way it hits right off the bat. That's the one to me that kind of stands above the others. I think Fox is solid too. To me, the only loser is NBC. I think the rest of them are all all pretty good.
Yeah, I went with the ESPN, assuming that they're going with the Monday Night Football theme, which is a classic. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Sunday night song. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I like the after they play the song and they have this kind of orchestrated music that comes in.
Right.
That I like, but not the waiting all day for Sunday night.
Yeah, no, that's no good.
What about Christmas song? Do you have a favorite?
Well, it's not the best song. I went with It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year, and it was purely nostalgic reasons. That's the song that we'd go over to my grandma's house on Christmas Eve every year, and she was a huge Andy Williams fan. So that song would always be like seemingly playing whenever we walked in the door. And so a lot of like good memories where sometimes you hear a song and it takes you back to a certain place. And so for me, that's why I went with that one. I think the king of all songs, Christmas time, is obviously Mariah Carey. But for me, I went ahead and picked the one that had the most sentimental value. What about you?
Yeah, of this list, probably like from a traditional standpoint, Oh Holy Night's probably my favorite. Because if it's sung by the right person and the right voice, it can almost kind of have almost a mystical kind of sound to it. Almost not even like it's almost bigger than a song. But just in terms of like just a great Christmas song, Mariah Carey, I mean, you can't get any better than that.
Yeah.
You can't get any better than that. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there, Wade. Thanks for popping on. It's been a few months, but I was glad you were able to make it on.
Thanks for having me. Anytime. If we want to do an off-season kind of deal, or if you need anybody down the stretch, just let me know.
Yeah, we'll do it. I know we're trying to do, once the season ends, we'll probably do, predict the keepers, all kind of fun stuff like that. Hope the family is well. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pretend to stop it, and then we can talk about Musa for 2 minutes. I don't know if you saw that last week. I forgot to press stop, and Jeff started talking about Musa checking out, and it started to create some controversy. So it was classic.
That was good.
All right, man. Well, have a good one.
You too.